Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.
Welcome back to the Global Indian Podcast, home to the greatest conversations and the official platform for people of Indian origin. Yes, let's face it, we are everywhere. Now, you know, every single week we plunge into the human experience behind our perceptions of identity, take a second look at the countries we now call home, and tackle those big conversations. Now, we continue our voyage across the Caribbean, having a look at the new destinations and understanding a bit more of the complexities of identity and understanding the economic nature of where the countries are. This episode, I'm joined by the remarkable Suleiman Bulbulia, who is not only highly respected in Ireland, but he played a pivotal role next to the Prime Minister Mia Mottley to help the transition of a country between a monarchy to becoming republic. Yes, we all remember the scenes of Rihanna on stage there. This is an incredible discussion because not only do we delve into his own life as a first generation Barbadian, but we also have a look at the role of cultural custodianship and how the communities are gelling together in a really powerful way to make a difference for all on Ireland. This is a remarkable podcast because it is one of the only countries in the Caribbean that I personally haven't visited. So it's definitely on my books. As always, if you enjoy this, well, you can enjoy the entire repertoire of discussion. So come over to the website, which is www.globalindianseries.com. And if you two would like to be involved, well, drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you. As always, thank you for listening in, and I hope that you enjoyed this incredible discussion. And many thanks to the many sponsors and supporters, much of which you'll hear from soon.
Hi, my name is Divya, and I'm co-founder of the Global Indian Podcast. Before you get to today's show, I've got a quick favour to ask. If you've been enjoying our conversations, I'd love if you could take just 1 minute to leave us a review on the platform that you're listening to us on and share our work to friends and family. It helps us out a lot. Word of mouth is the primary way that we grow. Thanks for your continued support.
Hi, my name is Nestor Alfred, CEO of St. Lucia's Citizenship by Investment. Think freedom. What comes to mind? Freedom to explore, to travel to any destination for work or play. Or is it freedom of expression? Being surrounded by the globally minded, those who care for society and environment. Every year, people from around the world apply for St. Lucian citizenship because they realize that real freedom is based on choice. Discover more about St. Lucian citizenship and how it's helping global Indians achieve more.
My name is Chitra Stern, and I am a proud Global Indian Ambassador and CEO of Martignal Resorts and Martignal Residences. We pride ourselves on the journeys that define a community, and our developments bring people together. Did you know that over 70,000 people just like us call Portugal home? The Global Indian journey has brought people together in a meaningful way, and on behalf of all of us at Martignal, we want to thank you for joining us in these remarkable conversations. We look forward to seeing you here in Lisbon post-COVID. Have a great day.
And just move. Get up and just move. Get up and just move. Get up and just move.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your program. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. From lovely Barbados, we've been the sunny, sunshine, but we've been having rain. It feels like England. It feels like the UK. For the last few days. So I'm just wondering what's happening with the weather.
Oh, you were just acclimatizing yourself for the podcast. That's all that was happening.
Of course.
It's very kind of you.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. And Barbados is a lovely island. As you just mentioned, all the beautiful, famous people that have come from our island, especially Rihanna. And all the cricketers, and it's a lovely island, and I'm happy to be a Barbadian. I was born in Barbados. My dad came from India back in the 1950s. His dad before him in the 1930s, and so I was born in Barbados. I grew up in Barbados. I see myself as a Barbadian. Obviously, my background is ethnicity is Indian, but I feel myself very much a Barbadian. And that is the case with most of the Barbadians who are of Indian background here. And most of the persons of Indian background in Barbados are originally The parents or foreparents came from India. Most of them are from Gujarat, and that area of India, Gujarat area, and particularly close to Surat, the villages close to Surat in the Gujarat area. We also have South Indians, and we have Sindhis as well. The community of Indians probably don't go larger than 5,000 persons on the island. But we feel part of that community as well as part of the Barbadian community. And we have done well over the years. I mean, in terms of business, in terms of education, in terms of opportunities that we have given ourselves and our parents have given our kids and so on. For me, it's been a journey for me, recognizing where I'm from, where my parents are from, where my grandparents are from. But the fact that they came to find a better life in Barbados, because at that time in India, things were hard. They were struggling, the villages, and they came to Barbados basically with nothing, looking for a better life.
Because what's interesting is, I was reading your biography. Your grandfather came over with a metal suitcase with just a shirt in there. And
that was my dad, yeah.
Your dad, and it's this amazing stories. But the community in Barbados is incredibly unique compared to the rest of the Caribbean, because you had the vast amount were indentureship. But in Barbados, it seemed like it was a potluck destination that somehow people came across. Run me through what exactly happened. How did the Indians find their way there?
So as you rightfully said, was the Caribbean. Obviously, most of the Caribbean was part of the British Empire back in the early 20th century, and so India also being part of the British Empire in the early 20th century. There was traffic between India and the Caribbean or the West Indies, the English West Indies, and that was mainly indentureship. After the end of slavery, you had the indentureship where the British colonial powers brought Indian indentured servants, but none came to Barbados. Barbados didn't have that experience because of the small island. Most of the enslaved after emancipation went back into the plantations. So in Barbados didn't need to have indentureship, didn't have that experience. But what happened was Indian migrants like my grandfather and others in the earlier days, and then my father, they were looking for better economic opportunities. And so they set out from India to come to really Brazil, in some cases, South America, to work. They were seeing opportunities or hearing of opportunities or reading of opportunities in Brazil, in South America. And by chance, the first East Indian was a Bengali. For some unknown reason, he went to Trinidad because his father-in-law was there. For some unknown reason, he ended up in Barbados around 1910, 1913, a Bengali guy. And he ended up here and he loved it. And he started a unique business. Well, unique for us, not unique necessarily in other parts, but it was called the itinerant trade. And these were people coming from an agricultural background, coming into Barbados and started a different type of business altogether, which became really synonymous with the East Indian in Barbados, the itinerant tradesman. So what he would do was buy goods, and he would go in the countryside and he would sell them on credit to the poor Barbadians, because they couldn't afford to buy cash. And the merchants in the city weren't selling on credit. So they found a niche. And then after them, the Bengalis, so the old saying is that when one Indian goes one place, the rest will follow.
Absolutely.
So then he called all the Bengalis, his family, and the Bengalis started to come. But by the mid-1920s, that migration petered out. And then the Gujaratis turned up. They turned up in 1929, about 5 of them. One of them was my great uncle. And they came to the island again by chance. We don't know why they came. They just, they heard about Barbados and they came. And when they came, they found the Bengalis. And the Bengalis were seemingly doing well. So one of the ideas of doing well was that you had a chicken tied to the bed.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you saw a chicken tied to the bed of the Bengalis. Oh, they're prosperous. So let's stay here and do something too. So that's the story in the beginning, So they started to come as economic migrants. And as one came, they were called the rest of the others. So in the early years, it was all men. Men just came, and they tried to make a fortune, send back money to home. And some of them got married in Barbados as well, to Barbadians, even though they may have had a wife in India.
What's interesting about your story is because you're heavily involved in Barbados. You're not just an outsider in. You're born there. You're first generation, as you proudly mentioned. Yeah. But you've been awarded the Peace Prize in Barbados. You've spoken at Thanksgiving for Independence Day there in the country. You deal with both sides of the political parties there. And almost you'll bridge your gateway because you're also a fellow historian. You write loads of books. You work with a lot of different authors on Ireland. How has the background to Barbados with the Indian influence in there enabled the identity of Barbados to change? Because in some other parts of the Caribbean, it's almost that you have this huge frictions between the communities. You know, we can talk enough about Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and some of the other markets, but Barbados, somehow everything just moves a bit more smoothly, at least upon the surface.
I think that's true to a great extent in that Barbados has managed to merge its different groups. Now we are a minority, don't no doubt about it in terms of numbers. Our numbers are small as compared to the larger number of people on the island. Barbadians generally has been a historical reality. They're embraced. They will embrace anyone and everyone. And so East Indians have been embraced in Barbados, primarily as a minority group, as a group that has contributed to the development of Barbados. And there have been times when certain things have raised its head. I mean, back in the 1980s, for example, you had politicians and you had Calypsonians. So back in the 80s, Calypsonians would sing political commentary. You know, so they would talk about different things. So you had this Calypsonian that sang about, in the 2000s or in the late 1990s, so he's forecasting the future, the Indians will take over. And then they had the politicians, some of them jumping on board with this. So, you know, you had that kind of tense feeling around that time that, you know, the Indians are going to take over. And so they had songs that came out. But you also had that balance where the other politicians were saying, no, we're not going to go down that road. You know, you had leaders in the community, religious leaders as well in the community who came on and said, no, we're not going to go that road. We are embracing society. So thankfully in Barbados, you have a balance. You have those who will say, you know, let's watch the Indians, and you have those who say, no, we're not going to go down that road. We embrace everybody. So over the years, we have managed to bridge that gap. And by the nature of what we do, we contribute back to the society. We try to as much as we can. We work in business. And that's by my journey as well. I feel my journey has been one of building bridges, not building walls. So I see myself as building bridges between the communities. And I have been recognized for that by government. And there are others, not only me. I mean, there are others that have been doing the same thing, building bridges. I work closely with a good friend of mine, Sabir Nakuda, who's written on the subject, Bengal to Barbados. His first publication spoke about the history of East Indians and what they've done over the years in Barbados, contributed back to the society. So that has helped him building a kind of understanding. But as you rightfully said, it's not always positive. There are some negatives at times, but we try to work through that. And Barbadians generally are, as I said, embracing people. We are a tourist country. We welcome tourists. We're open to that. So even its own people, it will welcome and protect the rights of minorities generally in Barbados. Our rights are protected.
Well, what does identity mean to you? Because you're in a very interesting situation, because I know on your father's side, they came from India. I think, is it on your mother's side? There's a mixture of Irish, local indigenous, and it's almost, you are the united colors of Benetton on the Sunshine Island, right? So it's, what is your identity? How do you see yourself?
Well, I see myself through various lenses. So one of them, for sure, my faith plays a very important role for me. So I'm a Muslim. You know, I'm Muslim by faith and so on. So that is important to me. Important to me also is my nationality. So I see myself as Barbadian. You know, I am Barbadian. Everything Barbadian I am, you know, and except what clashes obviously with my faith and so on, then, you know, I will not get involved in. And I see myself as having, as you said, a diverse background. So yes, my dad is from India, so I know of my Indian heritage, and I don't disown that. I own that very much. My dad came, as I said, as I know you mentioned, you know, he came with nothing, a suitcase, that's it, orphan, when he arrived in Barbados in 1953. I own that. I own that narrative because I think that is important for my journey. And I also recognize that I am part of a wider group of people that have a mixed background. As you said, my grandmother is of mixed background, Afro-Barbadian great-grandmother, Scottish origin great-grandfather. So I embrace my background, and I think it's important that we do, all of us do, embrace what we have as our heritage and try to use that to benefit the society, because we should not be polarizing our society.
Do you feel that there's a misconception of you whenever you travel? When people see you and they say, "Hey, okay, how's it going, Suleiman? Where are you from?" How do
Yes.
you answer that?
Well, I tell them I'm from the lovely island of Barbados. For some people, especially in the Middle East, where's Barbados? Well, in recent years, I get to say, well, you know where Rihanna? You know Rihanna? Say, yeah, I know Rihanna. I say, well, then, yeah, that's where Rihanna is from. But yeah, in the Middle East, you tend to be, you might be considered Indian, so you say, so that has its own nuances,
Yeah.
own difficulties at times. But once you say South America, and then you say America, and then you say, okay, well, in between those two,
But how do people? What's the biggest misconception do you think people have about you then? Because as you rightly said, it's obviously you have your faith. You see yourself as a national. You are from Barbados. You are Barbadian, but other people will see a skin not as an arbitrary factor of humanness, but almost as a personal identification to say that is where you're from, and therefore you don't have an allegiance to this. Yeah. Run me through that side, because that side's been really interesting across the Caribbean.
Yeah, it has to be I have to navigate that. So from young growing up at school, I would have been seen as an Indian person. So in school, you had the whites, you had the black Barbadians, and you had the Indians. So I would have been seen as an Indian Barbadian. And with being classified as an Indian Barbadian comes its own expectations. So in Barbados, for example, Indian community has an expectation that they don't do certain things or they do certain things. And so in school, you had to navigate that, and my friends and so on. But my friends were as wide as possible, and I interacted with everyone. And I think my friends from school, my colleagues from school, will tell you that that they got a whole different picture than what they thought, what the perception was of who Indians were. So they always felt there was a perception that Indians were in a bubble. They didn't interact. They didn't want to, I can't go by my friend's home, that kind of thing, because they're not the same religion, or they're not the same culture is different. So I had to navigate those different things. As you got older in life, you recognize, more mature, you recognize what you needed to do. And again, you had those same stereotypes, okay, you're Indian, you might not come by my home, or you're not going to eat my food, you're not going to eat my chicken, or you're not going to eat my macaroni pie, or you're not going to eat my rice because you're Indian. Your culture doesn't allow you to do that. So you had to navigate that, and you had to explain, well, then I will eat your food. For me, I'm a Muslim, so it has to be halal, Yeah. So then you say, well, what is halal? So then you explain what is halal. So those are the types of things that you have to do. And if you shy away from it, then you're not going to build bridges. If you run away from it, you're not going to build a conversation. And so for me, it's about building conversations and getting people to understand. I've managed to do that successfully. Some Indians in Barbados haven't. They just stick to themselves, and they say, well, it's too difficult. I don't want to get involved in a discussion or a conversation. But it's about building that conversation with other people.
Looking forward, obviously, talking about the big conversations, there's been one that has predominantly been across the airwaves everywhere, and that's obviously your PM, Mia Mottley's stance with the Queen and turning into a republic. Now, what's that like on Ireland? What's the reception been there? And how does it have impact?
Well, I had the opportunity, the Prime Minister invited me to be part of the Republican Transition Committee, one of the only East Indians on that transition committee. She had a variety of people. So I had the opportunity to be up front and center in transitioning Barbados from being a monarchy to being a republic. Now that had its own challenges because it came in the midst of COVID. People were worried about COVID, and they're wondering, what is the government doing? We're busy with COVID. Why are you bringing this republic agenda on us? But it had to happen at some point in time. I mean, we became independent in 1966. The Prime Minister then, who brought us to independence, Errol Walton Barrow, he also had the idea of becoming a republic, but he recognized that it's a journey, and we had to go through the independence program, because even at the time of becoming independence, as my research showed, Barbadians were not even happy with becoming independent either. There were some Barbadians who said we should retain the Queen, and we are Little England, and you had that. So even when he brought Barbados to independence, there was opposition. So then he went through the process, and over the years, there have been a number of people who said, look, we need to become a republic. They had commissions, they had inquiries, they brought in the public. And over the years, it has always been generally agreed that eventually Barbados should become a republic. But who was going to bell the cap? You know, no politician took the opportunity to bell the cap, even when they had a majority in power.
Yeah.
Prime Minister Motley said, look, you know, it's time, the time has long passed for us to become a republic. Not only that, I think the Black Lives Matter movement and what happened in those 2 years prior to us becoming a republic kind of pushed us to say, look, there are a lot of issues with the monarchy, you know, and the monarchical family. What's going to happen after the Queen? And then you had the issues of racism being raised, and you know, the whole institution of white supremacy and so on. So all of that came together as one perfect storm to say, well, look, it's time for us to really look at this. And Prime Minister said, look, we're not going to waste time. November 30th, 2021, 55th anniversary of Barbados independence, we're going to become a republic. Just let it happen. Make it happen. So we were tasked with a responsibility of making it happen. And we had only like 6 months, that's so much, to make it happen. So we had to make sure the laws were put in place and things were done. But Prime Minister Motley was good about it because she said, you know, we're not going to change any symbols. We're not going to change anything about Barbados. Basically, what we're going to do is transition from being a monarch to being a republic. That's it. And we're going to remain what as is. Barbados has been stable. We have had a stable government over the years. We have progressed. It's just another step in our journey to become a republic. We're not, and I know the British media said we ditched. You know, that's the word used, ditch. But we had Prince Charles here at the occasion of becoming a republic. You know, Prince Charles was invited. I think that was a grand move, actually, you know, because the media will have followed him.
Yeah.
We had Rihanna here when we had the republic. The media would have followed her. So all attention was focused on Barbados. So that's a good move, too.
But what does that do in terms of the sense of identity on Ireland?
I think that it pushes Barbadians to reflect upon who they are, where they've come from, and where they're going. Now, many Barbadians are just caught up in day-to-day making a living. And as I said, it was done in the midst of COVID. So it was even more, COVID was having a lot of impact on the economy and the average Barbadian. So the average Barbadian, as we went around speaking about the Republic, well, that doesn't really matter to me. You know, what matters to me is tomorrow when I wake up, is anything going to change in my economic circumstances? So a lot of Barbadians were actually saying that whether we are a republic or monarch, at the end of the day, I got to go and earn my living. And if I don't have an opportunity to earn a living, what does this all mean to me? So we had to also navigate those types of stuff. You know, what does it mean to the average Barbadian? And what we recognized was that there's a large disconnect between political establishment and what the politicians do and what the average Barbadian wants. And so there needs to be that conversation of bringing back that, bridging that gap between the average Barbadian, the daily struggles, and what the government is doing. And a lot of people are not just involved in government anymore. It's just, you know, it happens. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. I'm concerned with my own situation. So politicians, and I think Prime Minister Motley recognizes that, and she is enforced with her politicians and her MPs. You know, you have to go back into the communities. And at least once a week or whatever, you have to be there in your communities. And she's trying to bring about that, building back the communities and bringing back the connection between government, politicians, and communities. And it's an important conversation because I think we need to have it. A lot of people are disengaged from the civics. A lot of people engage from what is it that Barbados must I do to build up Barbados? You know, so we need to get back to that path.
Well, what is, because again, this kind of revolves around the identity of you, because you're sitting there as a human being first and foremost, and you have all these cultural perspectives around you. You got this part of you, which is very much that you recognize as Indian nostalgic connection. So does India mean something to you then?
It does, because it's my ethnicity. It's my background from my father's side, especially, but also from my maternal grandfather's side. So it means that to me. I mean, culturally, it means that to me. I mean, interestingly enough, Rajan, we recently, the government recently, about a week ago, they brought in a well-known executive producer from Bollywood to Barbados to start looking at filming Bollywood films in Barbados. Now, this is interesting because, I mean, our community is so small, but the fact is that Barbados can punch above its weight. It can be on the world stage. and it can attract a large institution, film institution like Bollywood, to come to Barbados and say films.
As long as the film concessions are there and there's liquidity within the
of
economy that
course.
can provide it. Absolutely.
But the government has been good to say, well, you have to give back too. You're not only going to film, you got to give back something to our communities. So, that negotiation will go on. So I think Indian community, and as an Indian, I see us as having a role in our developing of Barbados through building relationships with India that benefit, I would assume, both parties. Obviously, India doesn't need much from Barbados or anything at all, but we can build that relationship. The High Commissioner to Barbados, who's stationed in Suriname, came to present his credentials, and we had a really lovely chat. And we were talking about what is it that we can do to work together to build our community, building out things that will benefit Barbadians. And he was saying, there are a lot of scholarships, there are a lot of different things that the Indian government does that Barbados can necessarily benefit from. And so we need to start building back. And Barbados and India has a really great relationship going back to independence. Yeah. The speaker's chair in the House of Parliament in Barbados was donated by the Indian government in 1968.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it's a lovely chair. It's made out of special Indian teak wood. It's well carved, and it's been there since 1968. So the Indian government, and we are only one of 6 countries in the world that got a speaker's chair. Very unique. So we have a very close relationship with India.
And then I guess, does that relationship expand then for the people-to-people part with Indians in politics around the world? Because then you look at countries like Portugal, where the PM is of Indian origin. You have a look at your neighbors in countries such as Guyana, Suriname, and then you have a look at countries like Canada, where you have a large proportion of the business communities there. So is it the case that Barbados, because of that multiculturalism, is utilizing that people-to-people relations to build up those organic bridges across the globe? Or am I just being too far positive in that notion?
I think we need to work it. And the problem is we haven't worked it over the years. So what has happened is we've had the people-to-people relationship. So, a lot of our community here in Barbados does still go back to India. Actually, I was looking at it as a cycle, because originally it started with our grandparents coming because of economic reasons. Now a lot of them are going back because of economic reasons, and not necessarily going back to stay. They're going back to sell land. There's land there to sell. They're going back to do business, but also to bring back the money to Barbados. So, it's like a cycle, and so there is opportunities of going back and forth between India and Barbados. India now becoming a super power in terms of economic resources and so on. Its numbers are burgeoning, and it's an economy that's seemingly doing well. So you have now an opportunity for Indians here to capture stuff there and bring it back here.
I was going to say, on that note, India obviously, as you said, means something to you. Yeah. Do you feel that you mean anything to India?
I think we are kind of small in the whole plan of probably India. And India is a large, huge country. So I think we perhaps a little dot on the radar for them, but we have to be the ones that work it. We can't expect them to be the ones that work it. And I recognize that we have to be ones to go to Bollywood and say, look, come to Barbados, look at us, bring the spotlight on us. So we can't expect them to do it. We have to do it, and we have to work it and make sure it's done properly. So I think we have to be the ones that say, you know what, there are opportunities, let's go and try to grab them, and let's
be proactive.
I think Prime Minister Motley has said that in terms of the world stage. Barbadians have to be a global citizen. She keeps saying it. We have to be a global citizen. Language, we have to learn all the languages. I'm so sorry that I didn't learn my father's language. I grew up learning English. He spoke Gujarati. My wife speaks Gujarati, but I don't. So, but we should. Our kids should know languages. They should know Hindi. They should know Gujarati, because that's our part. Other families, the kids should know Spanish, French, whatever, Arabic, whatever, because we should be global citizens. We're too small an island to say, let's be on our own. Global citizens. That's what Prime Minister keeps saying.
Well, there's something in your bio that struck a chord. You said, despite the size of Barbados, we do punch a pound overweight, but we have so much more opportunity. And it's about galvanizing all that. So then how do you progress forward? Because some of the big issues happening in the Caribbean, things like food insecurity, you got the plethora of hotels, great, wonderful. But we saw just how exposed they were during times of COVID, where literally everything came to a standstill. Now, obviously, we got the whole issues when it comes to OECS. We've seen things like the CBI programs in other countries that have had a plague of impact upon local communities. What do you do with a small island like Barbados that doesn't have many natural resources and is suffering the plague of a lack of tourism, and then again with the food insecurity? What are the options available?
What are the options? The options are what is currently happening, building relationships or strengthening relationships with your neighbors. So for example, Guyana can feed the Caribbean if it goes into that route, because it can grow. It has natural resources. Yeah. It has the land. It has the fertility of the land. So what Barbados has now positioned itself is have an excellent relationship with Guyana and say to Guyana, let's start building out our food security from you. So we might not be able to do it for ourselves, but you can do it. You're a neighbor. You're not too far away. Let's start looking at food security from your angle. Trinidad has other natural resources. So you start to build relationships as small island developing states to start to counteract the international pressures. Food, and as you said, food is a major issue in our part. We need to get back to the land. Barbados, unfortunately, when we became independent, went the route of moving away from the land to white collar businesses and that kind of thing, professionalism. The recognition now is that we need to get back to the land. Now, strange enough, it was the Guyanese who were coming to Barbados when Guyana wasn't doing too well that started to work the land in Barbados. So you see that you have a lot of farmers in Barbados of Guyanese Indian background that are farmers in Barbados. So they started to work the land in Barbados because generally Barbadians, even my community, we moved away from the land. East Indians in Barbados didn't work the land. We're not agriculturists, even though our great grandparents were in India. We were not. So you had the Guyanese, you had some Trinidadians as well coming to Barbados, Indo-Guyanese, Indo-Trinidad, that started to work the land and did very well. So we have to get back to the land. I think the thrust is that. Also innovation in agriculture and innovation in animal husbandry, that you have to get towards that as well. More productive sectors. And navigating also, as you said, the financial institutions and how OECS and European Union and these agencies tend to put the screws on you, even though they themselves are involved in all shady stuff. So yeah, the disparities are there. And one of the things is that our prime minister is a global prime minister, and she will raise these issues without fear of anybody doing anything. She will raise them and she will say, look, we are different. You have to treat us as a different entity. You can't treat us as a large country. You have to treat us as a small developing country. And not only that, the environmental impact of climate change affecting us. Hurricanes are getting stronger. Drought is an issue. We're straddling all of those issues. Tourism affected when you have war, when you have environmental issues, when you have pandemics. Again, we rely heavily on tourism. I mean, our tourism is our mainstay. What happens in a pandemic? And that you said, all our hotels were shut down. What do? And we had to make sure we open back up. I think Barbados is still well loved by the British, so we're still going to get the English coming to Barbados, especially when we have cricket. They come in the droves. So I think we still have a product that we can definitely market and definitely sell to the world, and we're doing that, and we're going to continue to do that.
That's fantastic. I suppose my final question is, what is the one question you wish people would ask you?
Oh boy, never thought about that. I want them to ask me how to get to Barbados. How to get to Barbados. And I'll tell you how to get to Barbados.
No, there must be something that you wish people would ask, because your own story, again, we haven't mentioned it that much here, but you've been a remarkable cultural custodian on Ireland. You've done a lot of initiatives there. I know you've even set up a halal entrepreneurship cycle, something along those lines, looking at that area. And obviously that's from the religious side, but you're combining it with building up the bridges between the communities.
Yeah.
And for me, it's really fascinating because out of the Caribbean, I've been to most of the islands, but the only island I haven't been to so far is Barbados.
Really?
And it's only because I spoke to, obviously, a mutual friend of ours, Sudhir, and he mentioned about how the Indians got there. And I always thought, I've always been on the plane going through, but never on. And so it struck a chord with me thinking, well, one, it's got this incredible history that's very different and unique. And that changes the mindset of what national identity is. because it makes it a lot more cohesive rather than being divisive as in some other areas.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, your custodians of Barbados seem to be singers like Rihanna. I'm thinking, well, I don't really have much connection with her, though she's a great singer, but it's something that doesn't really spare my mindset to come on island. But what's the one question you wish people to ask? Maybe you about, as you rightly said, about Barbados, or maybe about real life in Barbados, because I know, again, it can't just be sitting in an island, sitting back, having your chai or coffee of choice. There must be another part to the country that you think, we really need to talk about this and tackle it head on.
I think we really, obviously you need to talk about empowering your citizens in Barbados. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, there's a disconnect between the average Barbadian and government and business people and people of means. And so you need to start building that connection. And we have to start looking at ways and means of having more economic opportunities for the average person. It can't be about, I'm stuck in one modality. And unfortunately, that's the reality of the enslaved period, that you had 300 years of enslavement. And you can't just expect one day to say, okay, well, you're free, go and do what you want. You have to now build out a whole series of building back, for those people who went through that experience, who have, as Sir Hilary Beckles said, prominent Barbadian historian, it's a generational curse that has come down that we have to start to break, and in so many ways it has affected the average Barbadian, psychologically, economically, emotionally. That curse of enslavement for over 300 years has caused generations after generations to live in poverty, to live in health issues, to live in many different psychological issues. So how do we as a community start to have these difficult conversations of breaking that? Now, people wonder, why is the East Indian talking about the enslaved period? We are all part of this. We didn't just come here to make money. Yes, maybe our forefathers did. But we have now to, as a younger generation, part of this community, to say we have to be involved in this conversation. Reparations is one of the conversations that Caribbean people is starting to have with the British government. Reparations for slavery. East Indians have to be part of that conversation. We have to be part of that discussion, not only from the indentureship point of view, but as part and parcel of the society that we have benefited from and have played a part in. So we have to get involved in the discussions on reparations. So when someone comes and asks me, how do you feel about reparations? I said, we need to talk about it, and we need to look at it, and we need to get involved in forcing it to be talked about and have a discussion and make sure that we move towards having reparations.
No, I'm glad you brought this up. So say, for example, you get the funding, and I'm assuming for you, reparations comes from the royal family of England and then some of the families that were involved in slavery. Is that correct? Or is it paid by the UK taxpayer?
It's as I said, it's at a point of discussion right now. So I don't think they have really mapped out where it's going to actually come from. And it might not only be financial. There are a lot of different pathways to reparations. And it's opportunities, it's building out opportunities is given, so it's not just about taking money or getting money. It's about different processes. And I think that those are the conversations that are beginning to happen. Unfortunately, they didn't want to even have the conversation in the first place, but now it's beginning to happen. So it's going to come from different quarters. It could be the royal family, it could be government, as we said. Well, if it's government, obviously it's the taxpayers. The taxpayers up to a few years ago was still paying, would you believe it, still paying for the reparations that the government gave to plantation owners for emancipation. At the time of emancipation, the British government voted that because we were going to proclaim emancipation, the white plantation owners were to be given recompense. And up to a few years ago, that recompense was still being paid by British taxpayers to former plantation owners or the descendants of former plantation owners. It's just crazy. It's a history that needs to be spoken about and talked about. And that's where that's the conversation that we need to have.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to end it. And I feel like I'm on a cliff edge right now in the whole conversation thing. But Suleiman, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for taking us on this journey of Barbados behind the flag itself.
Yes, thank you so much. And welcome to Barbados. You have to come. You have to come.
What an incredible conversation. I'm sure you agree. There is a general theme here that I feel that's kind of coming together across the Caribbean. And yes, there's a discussion of reparations and having a look at the monarchy. Now, it does obviously take a different stance towards a national identity, something that we really want to pick up in. So we continue next week on our voyages across the different nations, really understanding what lies behind the flag. And I think you can be absolutely fascinated by our next discussion as well. If you have any suggestions, if there's any destinations that you want us to cover, well, drop me an email. If you're fortunate enough to be part of our WhatsApp community, well, drop me a message directly. If you wanted to join, pop me an email. And if you just want to follow through, join us on the destination that you've been listening on. And if you're on social media, make sure you hook us up. We always like the friendly support. Until next week, I hope all remains well, all remains courageous, and that you continue the traveling bug. Speak to you soon.
Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.